Hey guys, I decided that in the end I would try and jump in with Ethony's 31 Days of Tarot. I didn't do it last year because I hadn't created my tarot YouTube by then and had every intention of doing it this year, and then it just got really busy. But when I started to see people grouping them together, I thought that could work for me, and that is exactly what I'm going to try and do. That does mean that each prompt will be a lot more short and sweet. You know, there's so many people to watch anyway that hopefully it means that you can get a few more in this way. The first prompt is a 2018 reading. So, energy and the major lesson. I'm going to carry on shuffling these. I've decided, off camera, I've decided to use my trusty Wild Unknown deck. So first of all we've got energy. And what's the major lesson going to be? So here's the cards that I have pulled. I would say that these very much would be a representation of my own personal reading, although I didn't specify that before, but of course if you resonate with them then that's cool. The energy for 2018 is the Daughter of Wands. I love that it's got the infinity sign for the snake. For me this resonates quite highly because I have spoke about in my December wrap up and favourites about how I want to focus more on gratitude and passion and enjoyment in the coming year, so 2018. I'm also creating, or not creating because I guess I've already started that, but I'll also start my own business away from tarot in the end of January, hopefully. So in terms of actually becoming a businesswoman for the first time ever, and focusing on that, but also that kind of letting go and feeling free and finding my fire again, because that very much was dampened with everything that happened in 2017, and I feel like I'm just at the beginning of trying to get my spark back. And so for me the daughter or the page, whatever you want to refer to it as, feels very in line with that beginning of that spark, that need for fire, that need to go a little bit wild as well, rather than completely jump in and balance everything straight away. And I like that it's got this bloom, because I feel like that's the focus, is to find different ways to bloom in the new year. That's the overall energy. The major lesson is actually one of my STALKER cards, which is quite interesting. I didn't think this was going to come up for me again. And I'm probably going to repeat myself, but hey ho. For me, this is about listening to myself and continuing to hear what's going on within. And what I mean within, it's like not just the intellectual, but the amalgamation of everything, my bodily responses, my emotional responses, and finding out what messages are coming from that, I guess, higher self, for want of a better word. That's not normally how I'd refer to it personally though, but what's coming from that instead of what's coming from fear or, you know, defense, etc. And also as well as working with my intuition, which fits my business and things like that very well as well, is to become more aware. And I would say that I have a great level of awareness usually, and then in 2017 everything, especially after the first portion of the year, became very focused on the one thing. And so in that I lost some of that ability to see past what's right in the here and now, and to be able to navigate my shadowy aspects and illuminate them and learn from them in a better capacity that's the kind of message that I'm getting from those two, and that is my reading. Straight into the next question is top 5 tarot decks of 2017, ones that I either purchased or were released. I don't think I got any decks that were released that year, but I really don't know. I've gone for ones that it says that I've purchased. I'll be honest, I didn't spend, because of financial stuff, I didn't spend a lot of money this year. So I count these as purchased, but it either, for most of them, my partner either bought them for me as a present, birthday, anniversary, Christmas, or a friend. But nonetheless, the first does have to be the gorgeous Wild Unknown, which you just saw me read with. And I heart this deck, you guys. I know that sounds ridiculous, but this deck has very swiftly become a soul deck, for want of a better term. I find it very to the point, and it's quite visceral for me. I love the animals. I get a lot from the choice of colour that Kim implements into this. And when I first saw it, I was just in awe of the artwork. I really didn't think that I would learn to read with it that well. It was a deck that I used to return to tarot after a bit of a break, to be honest, and after reading people saying it wasn't a good deck to start with, I had already purchased it, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful journey without sounding too sappy. It is definitely my go-to deck. Pulls no punches, gets to the point, but I don't think it's in such a short and sharp way that there's no emotion involved. I actually find it very emotional and healing as well. The next deck is my Bonefire Tarot, which I got this deck because I tried the whole Rider-Waite-Smith thing and for learning purposes, and I'm just really not a fan. When I say, I don't mean Rider-Waite-Smith in general, I mean the original, well, one of the original versions of the Rider-Waite-Smith. I've got this Centennial, and this deck, oh my god, Gabby's artwork just can eat me up. I love this deck. If a deck's gonna have people, and I know I've said this before, then Gabby knows how to do it. Like, if I'm going to have a people deck, I want to see emotion. That's one of my main things. I really feel like she is able to speak through her artwork. The actual book that come with this one as well, because this is the mass produced, as you can tell from the evil shine that that Schiffer loves so much. The book's really fabulous as well, hearing Gabby's insight into the cards and her process for making it. I've done the Little Red Tarot course with this deck, the first course that Beth made, not the new one, and I just love the symbology, love the artwork. It's a bit of a difficult one to photo, and being a bit of a, I don't know, I'm a bit over the top. I like all my photos to look pretty, so I actually use this deck a lot more than people see, but it is definitely one of my absolute favourites, and I've not seen anything like it since. Her artwork just brings me so much joy. The next one is Tarot of the Pagan Cats, and because I already had mystical cats, I wasn't sure whether I mean, when do we ever need a tarot deck anyway? But it sat on my wish list for ages, and then my friend got it and I was in love so much. There was so much gushing over her one, and then she actually bought this for me, also with a fantastic little baggie that her sister made with cats on it. And I use this more than my mystical cats. I love both. And when originally asked, I chose my mystical cats out of the two if I had to pick. But I'm actually finding I just work with this one so much. And again, this is my Rider-Waite-Smith deck. Like, this is very much a clone as far as what people would call a themed deck goes. This is totally usable in my opinion. I get wonderful messages from this. I am a cat person, so the cat's behaviour definitely resonates with me and I pick the messages up quickly. But I don't think that it's a themed deck in that kind of light-hearted, oh, it's just cats, that's cute kind of way. That's obviously just my personal experience, but this deck is freaking amazing. So I am so glad that she got that for me. When I was picking all of these decks, one thing that I have done, which I feel like I want to mention more for me than anyone else, there are some other decks that it was really hard to pick 5, and obviously that's why you pick 5 plus short and sweet, but I got them so late towards the end of the year that I don't feel like I've worked with them enough over these other decks, and that's basically how I picked, because I had 10 and I was like, I need 5. So these decks I've worked with for at least 2-3 months minimum, most of them a lot longer, but that's just the way I chose. This one, being said, was right towards the end of the month, but I worked with it heavily when Kelly from The Truth in Story did her Wildwood, and this deck is amazing. It's interesting because I didn't have this on my wish list, and it kind of jumps on and off, and the reason being, it wasn't because I didn't like the artwork, it was genuinely because of everyone else's feedback about the deck that I'd heard so far, about it not properly following the Rider-Waite-Smith and them finding the transition quite difficult, and because the Rider-Waite-Smith has kind of been my more dominant school of thought or practice this year. But then I had a long hard think and I thought, well, some of my favourite decks, you know, are the Wild Unknown. The Medicine Woman Tarot is what I would refer to as my soul deck. And actually I work really well with decks that go off on a bit of their own tangent, providing that they still have a solid foundation in one of the tarot schools. And I love this deck. I actually really enjoy the keywords and I don't find that they hinder me. Obviously I don't use the keywords every time without fail, and Will Worthington's artwork is just beautiful, which I know that I'm late to the party on that one, but I had a very healing experience with this deck and it managed to get into the top 5. And the last tarot deck is the gorgeous Raven's Prophecy, which again was one that I saw at the beginning of the year and wasn't ready for it and didn't think that I would be able to read with it. And then moving into the latter part of the year, I think that I got this around October or just before. Wow. A lot of my decks don't have people in. I mean, I appreciate this has got hands, but I am really finding myself quite drawn to decks that have more, I don't want to say minimal because I don't feel that's right, because I have a lot of animal decks as well and a lot of nature decks, but I'm much more fussy if a person's in the deck about how they're portrayed. But there's something about this artwork that brings out the fiery, passionate side of me, and again, it was just another really quick connection. I'm going to do a video on this deck because it's one of the decks that surprised me, and I feel like I'll ruin that if I start speaking about it now and take too long. But that is deck number 5. And straight into oracles because I have already gassed a lot. In no particular order, top 5 oracles, we have the Rebel deck, which is absolutely hilarious. And yes, it does swear. I love this deck. This is a dose of reality, of get your shit together, of this is what you might need to do right now because clearly you're not focused. It's a fun deck. I take it around people's houses even if they're not into tarot. It insulted my nan the first time I showed it to her. It told her that she looked like a shit show, which was hilarious. It's been great fun, and if you ever see me jump on an Instagram live, I will often do readings for people with this deck. It's just hilarious. There is lots of fun to be had with it. Next up, I've got the gorgeous Faeries Oracle, artwork by Brian Froud, which many of you will know if you have been on my YouTube for any time at all, that I'm a massive Froud fan. I love the Dark Crystal, I love the Labyrinth. If you don't know, he was the artist that then they created the animatronics and puppets from. And this deck had been on my wish list for a long time, and my friend got it for me for my birthday. And the fairy energy is hilarious and naughty and spunky and on point. And one of the things that I find about this is, again, I forgot to mention, but I prefer decks when there's a balance. I'm not into... I have like one hug deck, a few decks that kind of graze the limits, but predominantly I like balance in my decks, and I think that that one has loads. Next up is Lavish Earth, which I crushed hard on this deck for a long time. Things that I love about this deck, apart from the gorgeous artwork, it's helped me learn about crystals a lot. And that is one of the purposes that I've used it for. Is it all upside down? Nope. It's got these gorgeous quotes that resonate with the crystal property and energy around the edge. It says who the quote's from. It's got these fantastic keywords, and then basically the blurb is a little bit about the energy and then a little bit about the actual crystal, mineral, whatever you want to call it. And here we go, upside down, upside down. It means being able to work with a lot of crystals that I wouldn't otherwise own as well. And like, I'm a crystal junkie, but there's, you know, only so much money and space in the world. This deck is a great one for using alongside readings, even if you've already used an oracle as well as tarot. It's a great little addition and does get used a lot when I read for people. And the next one is the Tree Wisdom cards by the lovely Lisa McLaughlin. I actually have all three of her decks, but if I had to pick a favourite, then it would be the tree, because I feel most attached to trees when I'm in nature. I'm a little bit of a tree hugger, and it's not a secret. I love that she uses chakra colours for this particular deck, because that's something I've been studying. And I feel that whilst some people might see this as a bit of a hug deck, I feel like there's a lot of places that you can go with the keywords. And in the tree one in particular, I feel like it's got more of a balance. There is fear, there's a few other keywords. She does have a blurb on the back. I love that it's got the tree's name and then the original Latin name. And I love the little faces in the trees. It just brings me so much joy. This one goes outside and in the garden and to the woods with me a lot. And last but not least, because it's amazing, had to be the other Wild Unknown deck. I live for working with animal energies. I love that this one's incorporated the elements as well. I feel like that's a really interesting addition, and whilst I might not always assign the animal outside of this deck to that particular element, I always agree with her reasoning behind it, and it's made for some really interesting spread creations. I'm getting a bit of a lisp. I've been talking too much today. It's gorgeous. Aside from that, people, gorgeous. Number 4, top 5 tarot books of 2017. They're huge. How am I going to fit them in the camera? Let's start off with the small ones. The Wild Unknown Tarot Guidebook. I know that there's not that much information in this book. It's very short and punchy. You could even argue that in being so short and punchy, it doesn't explore every aspect of the card, but that's fine. I think that bearing in mind that I use this book a lot more in the beginning of the year on my return to tarot, I might have had a wealth of information from years of growing up around tarot, but I needed to rewire and find a footing with it in particular. And this is a book that you can do that with. And it's a good book to just take with you and travel. You know, if you're having an off day and you need a keyword or something to spark your memory and the card's not done it, I actually really think that this is a lovely book. I particularly like her keywords, but then I like to consider both the shadow and the lighter aspect in my cards anyway as a whole, which I will talk about in the reversal question. But yes, I like that book. Another one is the Kitchen Table Tarot, for many of the same reasons. However, there is a lot more information in this one. It does have reversals, and I just read the meaning as a whole when I was learning. But I love the very personable, you know, the title and the information says it herself. Melissa wanted it to be like having a chat with you, and I think that she got that down perfectly. It's funny, there's bits that she talks about that you can relate to in cards. It really makes the cards a part of your life and experience as opposed to a meaning in a book. Obviously not all of them. You know, I am yet to read a book where I'm 100% on every single card, but I've happily recommended this book to a lot of people and also heard them then come back to me and say wonderful things about it. It's a great one and it definitely will stay in my collection. The next one is The Medicine Woman in a Guidebook, and this might confuse my regular followers. I didn't actually get this book until this year. I had a look back and worked out when it was, and it was the very beginning of the year that I got this book. So despite having the tarot deck since I was very, very young, I've had the tarot deck for absolute years, I never had the full book for it, and I finally managed to get a copy of it. And despite some, I mean, people can watch the review if they want to know my whole thoughts on this book. It's dated, and there is some language and a few comments in it that make that very aware to the reader. Aside from that, this is a resource like no other. There's so much extra information. Definitely not a beginner book, but oh my. And also this is a fantastic book to help people become more aware of the actual deck, because there are a lot of misconceptions about the tarot deck, and really they should have bridged that gap more in the little white book that comes with it, but they don't. And so a lot of people get caught in the misconceptions and then have bad feelings about the deck, and a lot of it is explained in here. So I'm going to cherish that because finding it was incredibly hard. That was before they decided to republish it. The next one is The Ultimate Guide to Tarot. This isn't a favourite all round. There are a couple of other books that I got that are on my Kindle that I think when I've spent more time with them, they probably would have been more likely to hit my top 5. But this was one that I used for learning, and it is great for learning the Rider-Waite-Smith. It's very, very in-depth, even on the minor cards. And to be honest with you, it's definitely a resource that I will keep, at least for the next couple of years. I think that it is a great beginner's book. The very last book, which is absolutely weighs a ton, is the Deviant Moon Tarot book, which I'm still working through. And apparently eating food on top of as well. This is amazing. I love the way that Patrick Valenza talks about his work and the cards and the whole process. One of the things I love about a good tarot book, if I'm not learning the direct meanings, which I don't really need to anymore, I've done enough study, at least for the time being, on that aspect, you know, your kind of newbies meanings and more. I love to hear about the artist's interpretation of the card, what it means to them, their choice for artwork. If you love the Deviant Moon, which I do, and you're probably confused why it wasn't in my top 5, if I could have had a top 6, then it would have been the next deck. I love that deck. I need to spend more time with it though, and that is why I got this book. This book is worth every penny. If you're thinking about it, go and treat yourself. Then the next question, question 5, is the card that stalked me in 2017. There were actually 2 of them. I've pulled them out of another deck because I preempted the question. As I already mentioned, one of the cards was the High Priestess, and I feel like that very much linked into, at the beginning of the year, I wasn't as focused on my health conditions because I didn't know it was going to be a permanent fixture, and I had really delved back into tarot in a heavy way, and I feel that this very much reflected that and the journey, building on my tarot abilities and linking them into other qualities that I already retained in terms of my intuition and my awareness and listening to myself and having that connection. Funny enough, as things started to change for me, this then stopped being my stalker card, and the stalker card that was coming through towards the end of the year was the King of Pentacles. Now for me, this didn't feel like a direct reflection. This one felt like it very much reflected my journey. This one felt like it did reflect some of the things that I had every intention of working towards and making happen, but it also felt like a message. Like, seriously, steady yourself. That's what it felt like, and this is a great picture for it as well. Like, whoa, you are going too hard and fast. You know, your mind, you're all up in the air. The swords as a whole entire suit stalked me the whole way through the year. Incredibly so, to a point where I was not posting all of my pulls because it would have just been the same stuff. I felt like this was a message to just ground and base myself in a very, in a very grounded way. Let's say grounded 15 more times. I can't think of anything else to explain it, in a steady way. But it also reflected the fact that I was focusing on my home environment heavily. I guess the business and financial aspect of it, and the more entrepreneurial aspect, is true in that is my finishing message for the end of 2017 was the creating of the business. Also dipping my finger into reading for others, which has gone fantastically well, and I've appreciated all of the opportunities and stuff. So I feel like this is a great representation and possibly something that may stalk me into 2018. Question 6 is the deck that I finally crossed off my wish list. It was hard because I got so many goodies. I wanted to show you something that I haven't already shown you because I've clumped these together and I feel like that's more interesting. Otherwise, I would have to pick between like 6 decks and I don't want to. This deck was on my wish list from the moment I saw it in a shop and they didn't have it, and I was like, no! To all the way through to the end of December when some of my family gifted it to me for Christmas. And it is the Tarot del Fuego. Oh my gosh. I knew that me and this deck were going to jam hard together. I love it. I absolutely love it. As you can probably tell, I'm quite into the fiery energies in my people decks anyway, because I feel like the Raven's Prophecy is quite fiery, although I do get some earth energy from it, but predominantly fire. And then again with the Bonefire, so clearly a theme for this Leo. And I've already got some wicked messages from this deck. I love the extra eyes, the peculiar people, the colours, the the Tower card, which I actually pulled, and how could anyone be offended by that? Adorable. I didn't even notice the little skeleton at the bottom. Totally resonating hard with this deck. This card's just amazing. My partner was like, that's a very strange deck. He said, I can totally understand why you are drawn to the artwork, because he knows what kind of things I like. I have quite an array, but this kind of artwork does bring me a lot of joy. But he was like, I don't get it. And I was like, don't worry. You don't have to get it. It's fine. So, yes. This was a card in particular that he didn't get. I am so happy to have this deck, and despite it making me giggle and chuckle, again, it's one that pulls punches, which I like. That's something that I really appreciate in my decks. And then question 7, and I'm going to stop there because I reckon that's a nice place to do 7 each time that I do it, hopefully. Depending on how long they are, I might change that. The last question is the deck that I worked with most in 2017, and why? It would have to be the Wild Unknown. I've already shared my absolute love for this. I guess I've worked with it the most because it's one of the ones that I had the longest. This one only just made it into the top 5 tarot decks of 2017 because I purchased it literally a couple of days into January with Christmas money, and it came maybe the second week. So I've had a lot of time to bond with it. It is a favourite. It's one that I choose to use a lot when I read for others as well, because despite whether people gel with it personally for reading or not, I've never really found anyone has too many issues with this deck. I feel like the messages are just very clear, and I don't want to repeat myself. You guys know why I love this deck, but that's why it's ended up being the one that I've worked with most. It is an all-rounder for me without losing any of the depth or emotion that I look for, because I like deep readings. Even if I'm not looking for something huge and massive and extensive, I still want deep. So until next week, when I manage to get another set of these done, thank you guys for watching. Feel free to comment below and get involved. Let me know if you're doing Ethony's 31 days of tarot. And thank you to Ethony for creating it, because I believe this is her 3rd year now. So it can't be easy trying to come up with something new every year. I will catch you guys soon. Bye.